Welcome to the Child Discipleship Podcast by Awana, lasting faith in Jesus for every child. I am Matt Markins.
I'm Mike Handler.
And Mike, today we're going to talk about the role of entertainment and fun in children's ministry. You know, everywhere we go around the world, what do we see kids doing? They're having a blast.
Kids are laughing.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
It's so important. But what role does it play in children's ministry? Let's check it out.
So Matt, this week we're talking about fun and entertainment, the role that it plays within children's ministry. You know, a lot of times you can have, we can be guilty of one of two extremes on this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Some people go way far one way, and maybe your weekly children's ministry is just all
amped up.
Yeah. It's just like going to Chuck E. Cheese with a little bit of Bible in there or whatever else, hopefully better pizza and But the other extreme too is no fun.
Boring.
Yeah, kids end up not wanting to be a part of things. And I mean, there's maybe some problems on either side. As we've been at ministry for 75 years as Awana, as we, like you said in the intro, have seen kids around the world engage in local church ministry, engage in discipleship. I know that there's some thoughts that you'd love to share on kind of the appropriate or kind of balance of fun versus kind of engagement.
Well, yeah, you know that I'm a kind of a documentary buff, or I like to know how are things made?
We have covered this in the past episode.
Story behind the story, right? So how did we get here? How did we get to Children's Ministry 2026, kind of the way we do things, especially if you're listening to the podcast and you're kind of new to being a children's ministry leader, or you're a new parent and you're wondering why do they do things the way they do at our church? So let's take a half step back. The church growth movement, the modern church growth movement, was kind of birthed out of some thinking of the 1960s, and then kind of moved into the 70s, and you started seeing more and more larger churches popping up. And then by the time you get to the 80s and definitely the 90s, mega churches in the church growth movement was really the predominant evangelical model of doing church. Right?
And another name we may have heard about this would be attractional church or whatever it might be there.
Yeah, so why don't we give a definition to that? So our team years ago developed a definition for what do we mean by the church growth movement or church growth model. And here's what we came up with. The church growth movement is the stewardship of knowledge and wisdom to grow the church through attractionalism marked by emphasis on evangelism, missions, practical ministries, and numerical growth. So kind of like we do in other episodes, let's read it through a second time and maybe have some dialogue. Mike, you just interrupt me where you think we need to talk. So here it goes. The church growth movement or the church growth model is the stewardship of knowledge and wisdom.
Yeah, I think that all sounds good right there.
To me, that sounds really good.
Yeah, and it's not as though we don't want our churches to grow. I mean,
everyone wants
probably no one listening to this is thinking
Jesus wants our churches to grow.
wish our church was smaller.
Yeah. So stewardship, God's given you, whether God's given you a little or whether God's given you a lot, He expects us to steward well what He's
been entrusted with people,
Exactly.
with opportunities, with resources. Absolutely.
So when it comes to wisdom and knowledge around what we've obtained as humankind or the church, the way we can centralize information on the internet to learn from one another on how to grow churches, that's just the stewardship of that knowledge. So far we're into this definition. Sounds pretty good. The church growth model is the stewardship of knowledge and wisdom on how to grow the church. Okay, Great. Sounds really good. Let's keep going. Through attractionalism. What's attractionalism?
Yeah, it would be the things that allow your church to be kind of that best hour of a person's week. It would be kind of no holds barred, making it comfortable, which isn't a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
None of these things in and of themselves are terrible or bad
Correct.
things or whatever else.
Correct, because we want people to come to Christ. We want people to come through the doors of our church.
And people in the New Testament were attracted to Jesus.
Correct.
I mean, he wasn't pushing crowds away per se. They all came to him.
Yep. So far, we talked about we're going to steward well the knowledge and wisdom on how to grow our church through attractionalism, meaning we want people to be attracted to the gospel and to church. Okay, so how are we going to do that? Marked by emphasis on evangelism, missions, practical ministries, and numerical growth. So to summarize, we want to steward these things well. We want to attract people. Or how are we going to attract them? Evangelism, like reaching out with the gospel to help people hear the good news and to respond to that. Missions, practical ministries like food pantries and divorce care and financial peace or Alpha, all these things we do to have practical ministries and numerical growth. So here's the problem though. What has happened over especially the last 30 years is the church has been a bit, you could say, obsessed. We've been a bit overly occupied with numerical growth, meaning we might say, our pastor might say, our church is all about discipleship. You might hear this, but you might get under the hood of our church and realize, well, the operation, the practical operation of how the church is designed and where the resources are spent is all about how do we get more people here on Sunday. Yeah. So that's numerical growth. So we're not necessarily criticizing, we're just analyzing, right? Like we're analyzing right now.
Yeah, yeah. And I would say that the activities of your church follow your church's mission, right? Yeah. So what you measure is what matters to you as a church.
Correct.
So to your point, if one of your goals, even of your children's ministry, is numerical growth. Again, none of us want smaller.
You and I are not down on numerical growth.
We all want to introduce as many people as possible to Jesus.
Correct. All we're doing right now is we're just simply putting on our analytical hats to understand what the church growth movement is. So these things, Mike, the stewardship of knowledge, we want to attract people through these ways, evangelism, missions, practical ministries, numerical. Another way of saying this, as you and I have read up on this, is removing unnecessary barriers. Like attractionalism is removing unnecessary barriers so that people can take a step into the church or take a step toward Jesus. So, yeah.
I mean, on the surface, it doesn't sound bad.
It all sounds good. Yeah. So now that we've have a kind of a definition and a clear understanding of what church growth movement or church growth model is, what happened kind of beginning in the 70s, you kind of see this, like these puppet ministries and children's ministry popping up. Moving to the 80s, you've got Salty, the singing songbook. Well, man, I grew up on that stuff. I love that stuff. We could just keep going and going. But what happened is some rational thinking here is if we want to grow our church, we want to attract families, right? New subdivision popping up, the church nearby, families are driving by on their way to and from work. We might want to put a sign out front that says, hey, we're having a VBS, or we have a great Sunday school program. Yeah. What are we trying to do? We're trying to tell families, hey, if you want to get your kids in church, our church has a really kicking, groovy, in the 1970s.
Wow, yeah, there you go.
As a really groovy Sunday school or kids ministry, your family's going to love this. By the way, once again, this is just logical common sense. This is just stewardship of what we know to be true.
No one is putting a sign out on the front of their church that says we want everything serious all the time.
Yeah, we have a boring ministry. You're gonna love this. No one's saying that. So, but what happened in children's ministry? Cottage industries were birthed on how do we make children's ministry more fun. Because if it's fun, the kids are going to say to mom and dad, I want to go back, especially in a world back then, 70s, 80s, 90s even, that had less entertainment, less access to entertainment for kids. You had to have a VHS player and a VHS tape to get kind of some of this access to entertainment. So we wanted to make our children's ministries more exciting and more fun. So entertainment began, 70s, 80s, 90s, began to become, then, by the way, 90s, enter VeggieTales, right?
Yep.
So, and every one of these brands I'm naming are just like dominant brands of a whole cottage industries that were birthed around them.
Yeah.
So what point are we making here? Out of the church growth movement, which was kind of the predominant model of doing church, especially by the time you get to the 90s, out of this came this thinking that we had to make our children's ministries more fun. And how do we do that? Entertainment. So there's like if this is a train, the engine of the train is the church growth model, and the next car that we hooked to that train was entertainment. We really want to make our kids' ministries more entertaining, because if we can make it more entertaining, it's going to be fun, and kids are going to want to come back, and they're going to want to bring their friends.
Again, no one is saying, let's not have fun.
We're not trashing this. We're just simply saying
it's a diagnosis.
It's a diagnosis. Yeah. We're analyzing, how did we get here?
Yeah, yeah. Which I think is a fair question, because that has to do with what we talked about in some regards in our last episode of relevance. You can
Correct.
only be on the cutting edge of fun.
Correct.
For so long. But you've got some further thoughts on this that will help inform this conversation.
Yeah, matter of
us.
fact, the reason we started with relevance before we got to entertainment and fun, so last episode compared to this episode, relevance is probably the larger framework of thinking, out of which entertainment comes within. Yeah. So so we have this book that we wrote called The Faith of Our Children. It's 8 timely research insights for discipling the next generation. We wrote this book because, as we've shared before, Awana has commissioned several research projects over the last decade on child faith formation and children's ministry. And we started everywhere we would travel or conferences we would attend, people would say, hey, how can I get access to that research? You know, we're talking about tons of 3-ring binders and data sheets and Dropbox files, and we can't just, we don't just pass that on. So we decided to comb through it, and we found 8 insights that we thought were the chief insights.
Making it digestible
and
deliverable.
Make it understandable. Yeah. So in this book, The Faith of Our Children, it's in 2 parts. The first part is formation. The second part is systems. Why do we do it this way? Formation, meaning these are the top 4 things that are known to form lasting faith in kids. And the back half, these are the systems that we use to form kids. So it's a bit of a gap analysis showing how sometimes our systems don't always match what we know to be true about formation. Thus why we're talking about this very topic. So in this chapter, we write this, which I think is an interesting way of thinking about this. So here we go. Here's a question. If fun was a fire, what logs do we use to fuel the fun fire? The fun fire.
I've
written a lot of really horrible sentences. That's not my worst sentence. I mean, that's a decent one. So if fun were a fire, what logs do we use to fuel the fun fire? So fun is important. Mm-hmm. I mean, right now, Mike, I'm just going to be honest. I'm having a lot of fun right now. This is good. This is great.
Yeah.
So fun is important. And when I go home tonight and the kids come over, my grown adult sons, and we're hanging out, we're playing games. We're sitting around talking and laughing together. Fun is just essential. And I think if Jesus walked into this room right now, throughout our conversation, he's going to smile. We're going to laugh. We're going to talk about some interesting things. So fun is important. It's essential to life. So no one is saying we don't want to have fun. So we're just simply asking, what would be those logs we put into that fire? How do we fuel it? So I think an interesting way of thinking about this, to illustrate maybe one of the logs, let's think about what kids are experiencing at school. Let's say your kids are in a public school, which I would say, statistically speaking, most children are in a public school.
Sure.
Would that be an accurate thing to say?
Yeah. I don't have the stats on that right now.
Yeah, we don't know the stats, but I bet you could pull that up. All right, here we go. So on page 83 in The Faith of Our Children, we have this little image. So if you're watching the video here, I'm sure you can see this, but a side-by-side comparison of the cosmos, like way up into the galaxies, where you see the stars scattered across the sky. So at public school or in school, your kids are learning about the galaxies. You're learning about the stars. You're learning about supposedly how long they've been there. And children are very possibly also hearing that those stars got there as a result of a big bang, and there was no intelligent designer, there was no creator, there was no God. So that's one image your kids are seeing throughout their childhood. They're being told this story, they're being told this narrative. Many children are. Now, side by side with that is a goofy Noah's Ark picture. I'm not talking like the Ark encounter in Kentucky, which is pretty much a replica of what we think based on what the Bible says. I'm talking like a goofy picture of the Ark where the giraffe is a caricature of a giraffe.
And like bigger than half the boat.
Exactly.
Kind of sticking out there. Yeah.
So these 2 images are sitting side by side in a child's growing up years.
So what you're saying is in school, by the way, according to the internet.
We have some results.
Over 80% of kids are in public school in the U.S.
There you go. There you have it. So if you've got 50 kids, I'm not great at math, but if you've got 50 kids in your children's ministry, then 40 of them are in public school.
Yeah.
And 10 of them are either private school or homeschool.
Private, homeschool.
So on
charter
average.
School, whatever.
On average, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So what you're saying, though, is that the truth that we feel a great amount of conviction about, that sometimes we don't display the right way. Like it's not uncommon to see this type of depiction of Noah's Ark. It almost feels tongue in cheek in some regards. Whereas
it's cutesy.
Yeah. Whereas like they're going to school and they're learning about like the bigness of the Milky Way, the cosmos.
Correct.
Like there's a seriousness to it, a gravitas
Yes.
that we are almost kind of underselling.
So I think we're picking on the Noah's Ark caricature art. We're picking on that as an example to say, children at school, this is where you get the real stuff, right?
Yeah.
This is where you're going to learn about science and mathematics and all of this stuff.
Yeah.
But at school, this is where you get the what might feel impressionistic, like the fantasy stuff or the goofy art and the goofy pictures. So for a child who that's their experience, at church, we might be using methodologies because kids are small, they're tender, they're gentle. We're trying to use methodologies that are fun, entertaining, and goofy. So what message might we be unintendingly sending to them?
Yeah,
right?
this is fantasy.
Yeah. So we're overgeneralizing here by using this side-by-side comparison, but I think we can look at that and draw parallels in other ways this happens. So let me go a little deeper into some practicality. I've been in children's ministry professionally as working in Christian publishing and working for Awana for over 20 years. Mm-hmm. The amount of goofy children's ministry videos, direct to child, meaning the videos that are intended for the children to see and watch on a Sunday morning. The amount of goofy videos I've seen, entertaining videos is really high. It's a high percentage. Again, what's the point? I'm not saying we shouldn't be doing that. I'm saying how many of those logs should we be stoking into that fire? I think we should be asking ourselves this because children are seeing that side-by-side cultural comparison. What are the other stories I'm being told through TikTok? Kids shouldn't be on TikTok, but many of them are. So what stories are they hearing there?
Yeah.
What stories are they hearing on Instagram? What stories are they hearing from their friends? What stories are they picking up in advertising and media?
What I hear you saying is, what are the stories of church, which is the stories of culture?
Exactly.
And
how are we telling those
correct.
stories?
Yeah,
What
methodology.
methodologies are we using? So I think it's possible that sometimes we're putting too many goofy, entertaining logs in that fire. And what if we thought differently? How could we think differently about how we stoke that fire? Fun is important. Fun is always going to be central, not only to the human experience, but to children especially. We should just be asking ourselves, to what degree does that goofy, silliness, fun aspect of play itself out in children's ministry? I think it should be there. But to what degree?
Yeah. Well, I think the question here is how much entertainment do you kind of get into maybe, and how do you balance it out with like the proper amount of, maybe we'd call it engagement within children's ministry, child discipleship within your church, right? Yeah. And I think perhaps we expect too little in one regard and too much in the other at times.
Oh, and flesh that out.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you're saying, kids oftentimes we feel like they're not able to handle X, Y, or Z. So then we do probably put more logs into the entertainment, the cute, the approachable, these types of things. I mean, is it a lot to talk about God punishing in a flood? That would be a gruesome sight, but at the same time, I mean, like we've talked about in earlier episodes, is this a story about Noah, or is this a story about God and his mercy?
It's great. Yeah. And how do we tell that story?
Correct. So what's that emphasis? And I think what I hear you saying here, Matt, is like, this is a conversation about emphasis on entertainment or emphasis on engagement and finding that right balance.
Yeah. So we're comparing entertainment.
Yeah.
And we're about to get into engagement here in a moment. But before we go there, one more item from this same chapter, from the chapter on fun, from the book, The Faith of Our Children. One of the earliest research projects we did, I mentioned this term a moment ago, was a gap analysis. And if you're not familiar,
explain what that is.
A gap analysis is where you compare, a particular area. We'll just stick with fun. In other words, we asked in this research project, I'll just read it exactly out of the book. Thinking about the purpose or objective of your children's ministry programming. For each of the following statements, and there was a list of statements, each of the following statements describe the statements describing a purpose or objective. First of all, tell how important you believe that purpose or objective was. So in other words, like equipping parents, that was one of those categories. Another one was Bible engagement. Another one may have been kids bringing their Bible to church, or whatever it was. Well, one of those categories was helping children enjoy their experience at church with special emphasis on having fun. That's pretty much an exact quote. Well, here's the thing. Like a gap analysis, it measures the gap, if one exists, between how important is it and what's your performance. How are you actually performing it? And in this particular research project, which I think was like around 2014, fun was the only area that had a very narrow gap to where importance and performance were almost the same number. In other words,
it was highly prioritized.
Well, not necessarily. Actually, it was one of the lower. It was lower on the importance scale. But our performance was so high that we were almost meeting the level of its objective. In other words, like, let's say equipping parents, which, again, we talk about in this same book. Also, we mentioned the gap analysis stats. Equipping parents, let's just say, I'm going off memory, but let's say it was like a 4.5 in importance.
In terms of perceived importance, we would say it's really important to do this.
So let's just say, I'm going on memory, it was 4.5 in importance, but 3.5 in performance.
By a self-observation.
Self-observation.
Like, we don't really do that as much as we should.
Yeah, so therefore the gap analysis, the gap was 1.0, right? Yeah. But what happened here in terms of importance, we rated it like a 4.3, and the performance was almost a 4.0. So the gap analysis was 0.0 or 0.3. Yeah. So here's the point. Fun ranked least important out of 10 areas we measured, but fun scored as our highest ranking in terms of our performance.
The least amount of gap analysis there.
Least
amount of gap.
Yeah. So fun, in children's ministry, fun is the one category where like we pretty much got it covered. We're doing a great job. Yeah. We're outperforming our own expectations.
We're punching above our weight class.
We sure are.
Yeah.
So we're good at this. In the church in North America especially, we're good at fun. We're good at entertainment. We're only asking, how many of those logs should we stoke that fire as we move into a continued, highly secularized, highly post-Christian culture? I think this is a valuable discussion.
Well, I think you can look downstream, right? And the measurement on this particular metric of fun can be seen even in how parents interact with their kids when they pick them up from our children's ministries.
Yeah.
What's the first question most parents probably ask their kids?
Did you have fun today?
Did you have fun today?
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
So that's already, that metric is being displayed as a matter of importance, as a matter of like higher engagement. What would be a better question, Matt?
Hey, tell me one thing you learned today.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
Or tell me something you did.
Yeah.
Or tell me something you heard. Or what's one thing you saw that caught your attention today?
Yeah.
You know what? These are questions that they can think about what they observed and experienced.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. And it's these types of questions. What did you learn about Jesus? Like anything like this. Yep. What did you read today? You know, like what stuck out? Absolutely. You know, that's a downstream type of like correlation, if you will, of
it's a good word, by the way.
How we're measuring fun. We may not consciously think, oh, I've got 10 segments in my children's ministry. 8 of them are quote unquote fun.
Yeah.
But that metric is still measured by the parent engagement with the child.
So let's swing the hinge of this podcast into what we'd like to compare fun with.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so we've been talking about two key words: fun and or entertainment, right?
Yeah.
Like that goofy, entertaining kind of fun aspect of children's ministry. So I think what I hear you saying, Mike, is maybe we need to think about this in terms of engagement. How do we engage a child, as opposed to our default being how do we help that child's Sunday morning experience to be fun?
Yeah.
So what would it be like to shift our thinking away from fun? Again, we take fun into engagement, but to think through more of an engagement lens as our default rather than a fun lens.
Yeah, I think I mean, honestly, it could look 100 different ways or countless ways, but I think it's welcoming a child into the experience rather than putting the experience on in front of them. Does that make sense? So it's like, I'll give you a couple of examples. I go to a church where we both go to a church where they practice confession.
Yeah.
And it's not anything weird or spooky. It's just,
You're not talking about we go into a private booth and do confession.
No. But in a small group type of environment, where I'll speak to other children's ministry leaders here, where you might have a group of 5th grade boys that you're with.
Okay, so Sunday school leader. Or small group.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
And you just make space to have what we call walking the light. It's 1 John, coming to life.
That's a good phrase. Walk in the light. Is that what you said?
Yeah. When you walk in the light as Christ is in the light, and it's really not allowing the shame of sin to have control over your life. You need to learn that at a young age, because we learn shame at a young age.
Yes.
I know I did, at least. So when we walk in the light, what that is, Matt, is it's taking truth and applying it to our lives in a very practical sense. So I might have a group of 5th grade boys that I'm co-leading with somebody else, and I might say, okay, we're gonna practice, talking about how we may have fallen short of following Jesus this week, and the fact of the matter is he forgives. So I'm just gonna model this out with you.
So every child has sin. Every child does sin.
I mean, it's not limited to just children, but absolutely.
But we are helping that life group leader or small group leader is helping that child to know, what do I do about my sin?
Yeah, exactly.
And we typically think, that's something they'll figure out in their adulthood.
Or, it's a very private matter that you just kind of, but when we confess
really good.
Our sin, he is faithful and just to forgive us, right? I mean, so let's just model this. Hey, Matt, I'll pretend you're a young child.
Yeah, that's not hard to do.
I'm not going to tell you anything that I have this gambling addiction or anything like that might be over your head, but I might, model the fact that, when I was driving the other day, I lost my temper and, I got angry, and that anger in that regard wasn't justified. It was sinful, actually, and I'm confessing my sin before you. Now you might do the same to me. You might
so as a 10-year-old, I just saw an adult be appropriately vulnerable and open and transparent, and my heart is slightly softened, and I'm like, well, if Mr. Mike can do that, then I can talk about how I did not share with my sister yesterday, and it turned into a big fight, and I kicked her, and I lost my temper, and I don't know what, and I knew it was wrong, but at the same time, I wanted what I thought was justice. So I now have a way to talk about this.
There's some categories
to get this out of my system.
I'm not gonna, hey, buddy. Everybody kicks their sister. But I'm not justifying it, that's not what I want to do here. But what I'm going to do here in an engaging type way is say, hey, I understand we get angry. Anger, though, when we take it out of control is sinful. But the good news here, Matt, is that the Lord forgives us when we ask him to.
Wow.
He is faithful in that. This is just going into a really simple engagement. This is not hard to do per se. It might feel awkward at first, but it can get easier and easier.
So this is really best in a small group.
It really is. Okay. And a lot of engagement is really good in a small group. We talk about becoming, right? We talk about life on live.
You're showing them how to become like
absolutely,
Jesus.
Yeah. And there's so many times where kids in our groups, they want to hear our stories.
Yeah. So do you have a large group example?
For engagement?
Yeah. So we were talking about fun and entertainment. Now we're talking about engagement. Do you have a large group example?
Yeah, I would say there's a couple of different things one could do. First of all, welcome your kids to serve. Welcome the kids in your group to serve. That's not necessarily a large group type of example, but that is something you could do in a larger environment.
Well, you just reminded me. Some churches for their older kids, like 4th, 5th, 6th grade, when they get to a certain age, they're allowed to help take on more of a service role in kids' church. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I remember both of us cut our teeth in leadership by stacking chairs, cleaning toilets, doing those types of things, right? Yeah. We probably don't expect our kids to do that a lot because we've position
We
that to somebody
professionalize
else.
that. Yeah.
Absolutely. But when we expect our kids to serve, that's an engagement type of opportunity.
I like this.
So it could be in your children's ministry, you might have an opportunity for somebody to help run sound or to press play on the video or whatever else.
Or to be a buddy to a new kid at church.
Or greeter.
A greeter, yeah.
Right? You probably have kids in your children's ministry because they all live at my house who are all extroverts.
Yeah.
All my kids are extroverts. So they're like, hey, I want to employ them in their gifts. I'm going to let them say hi to other people and let them feel welcome, seen, and known.
Passing out supplies or
Absolutely.
papers. Yeah.
These are all great ways to engage. Again, I think you said a good word there. Let's unprofessionalize some of these things. And in that regard, allow for engagement, allow for kids to lead, because in that they're going to find out how to grow in their faith, how to grow in their service, how to grow to be more and more like Jesus.
So I wonder, our listeners, I wonder what ideas they have. Like,
even
as I'm thinking about social media, I know we've got an Awana Facebook page, we've got Instagram, we've got our Bright page. I wonder if there's ways where we could curate and cultivate a list like this.
Yeah, child discipleship socials as well would be a great place.
Chalddiscipleship.com.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think this is an important conversation that has to be crowdsourced. Like, how fun is important.
Yeah.
Goofiness, okay, all that's great. It has its place. But what are the logs of that fun fire in the future, and how can we move to engage children more? Boy, I wonder what ideas we're going to come up with.
I think another cool thing here, just as we kind of close out this time together, is that kids rise to the occasion.
Yes.
You know, like when you expect, with your sons, with my son and my daughters, like when I expect something of them, now they don't always deliver in the way that I want them to, perhaps. You know, I left this morning with a full dishwasher at the house because somebody didn't unload it. But, you know, when
oh my goodness.
Were you there?
She has a reputation.
When we expect things of our kids, when we model it, when we expect it, there's a sense of fulfilling that expectation that's good. You know, that's rising to the occasion, if you will.
Yeah.
Nothing necessarily spiritual about that, but it is a way for us to help them grow and mature. Teachers expect their students to perform. You know, other places, soccer, little
coaches.
league, absolutely. There's all about expectation. When we have no expectation for our kids, they're going to fulfill exactly what we have for them there in the church. So
let's go back, kind of circle back to some of our previous episodes, kind of land the plane here. What are we after? Like, what's the goal? What's the vision?
Discipleship.
It's lasting faith in Jesus. And discipleship, child discipleship, or child faith formation, however your church, whatever vernacular your church uses, child discipleship is the formational pathway to shape lasting faith in Jesus. So what we've been discussing here, Mike, is fun has its place. We're doing a side-by-side analysis with what if we changed our lens, our thinking to, hey, fun is great, but how can we most appropriately engage them? Because when someone's engaged, think about that left fielder in Little League who's picking daisies out in the left field, as opposed to the one who's leaning forward on his toes, or he or she's waiting for the crack of the bat to go get that ball. That's an engaged left fielder as opposed to a disengaged one. So that's all we're talking about, is what are creative ways that we can engage the minds, hearts, the whole person of a child, because when that happens, they're more active in moving toward the growth of their own faith.
Well, just one last thing that hit me as I was listening to you talk here, Matt, is like Jesus modeled this for us. The disciples, they weren't batting 1,000, you know, like
clearly,
yeah, right, and yet Jesus didn't relegate. Oh, I'll just do this heavy lifting, and you guys
such a good
sit over here and watch.
Yeah, good reference point here.
Like Jesus welcomed them into the work. Jesus formed them through the experience.
Jesus let them fumble the ball.
Absolutely.
He gave them space to do that.
Yeah, right? And Peter, there's one lesson right there, you know, like how Peter, highest highs, lowest lows.
Yeah.
You know, and yet
for the whole world to see.
Yeah, forever. And yet to this young man, you know, Jesus entrusts the work of the gospel.
Wow.
You know, and so I think we could probably take a breath.
Yeah.
And trust passing out supplies to the 7-year-olds who are very capable to do this within our ministries. You know, and say, and not err on the side of just perfection, but actually formation.
This is so good. So, lasting faith in Jesus for every child. What forms that? Child discipleship, child faith formation. What a great conversation. We've got some more, we've got some critical conversations coming up in upcoming episodes. We hope you guys will join us. Look forward to seeing you there.
Take care.